Welcome to Transformative Principal, where you learn how to be a leader and not just a manager of a to-do list. I am your host, Jethro Jones. You can find me on Twitter at Jethro Jones. I've talked a lot about the mastermind in the beginning of this podcast for many years, and I want to invite you to be part of it. I want to share some things that have been the most impactful things for our members over the past couple of weeks. Here's a couple. Hearing that everyone is going through the same thing. Refining my thinking about the issues and challenges that are running through my head. Giving myself permission to let something go. And here's a funny one, talking to another adult. Sometimes that is the best part. So the mastermind really is a powerful thing. I would love for you to be part of it. Go to jethrojones.com/mastermind and let's schedule a little chat and we can talk about whether or not it's going to be right for you. That's jethrojones.com/mastermind. This episode is brought to you by John Catt Educational, a professional development publisher serving as the global leader in combining both research and practice in all materials. Find timely PD publications to support yourself and your faculty by visiting them online at us.johncattbookshop.com. Welcome to Transformative Principal. I am so excited today. We've got some amazing guests. We have three of them today. Number one, Miguel Gonzalez, the founder of Embark Education, his co-founder, Brian Sense, and also the executive director of Great Work, Inc. And finally, we have an awesome student who's going to join us, Samara. Welcome to all three of you, and thank you for joining Transformative Principal. So first and foremost, I'd like to start with you, Miguel. You are the founder of a very different school called Embark Education in Denver. And so can you talk to us a little bit about what Embark Education is and why you started that school?
Sure. So Embark Education is an innovative micro school designed for middle school students, 6th through 8th grade. And we are embedded in two small businesses where our school is literally a coffee shop and a bike shop. So our school and our students attend in those real world locations, and we support them to courageously inquire, engage, and discover a sense of self. And so really Embark started from trying to strip down education and kind of reimagine it from the beginning. And what does it look like to support students in an authentic learning experience and really design it with our students at the center and at the core. And we've done it in a way that it really kind of broke down the idea that schools are the center of everything, but rather put our learners at the center of it and then built around them, including having the real world learning spaces of the two businesses, and then the adults that surround our students are all there to support them through their learning experiences and their learning journey.
Great. So can you tell us a little bit about what a micro school is compared to other traditional schools?
Yeah. So a micro school is, some people often liken it to a throwback to the one-room schoolhouse, where really it is a place where there are, everything's just kind of shrunken down, including how many students attend. So we have 30 students across 6th through 8th grade, and we blend our grade levels so that way students are able to work across grades, where it's not really about being in 6th or 7th or 8th grade or what day you were born, but really where you're at in your learning journey. And so our educators work to bring them their learning experiences at their level, rather than saying, you're in 7th grade, here's the curriculum that is meant for you. So really kind of taking on that model, as well as, really being able to support our students across both the curriculum, but social emotionally through movement, and really getting to know our students through relationships.
Yeah, that's really important. So when you say micro school, that's probably not, 400 kids at your school. How many students do you have signed up, and how many is your ideal number of enrolled students?
Yeah, so we launched this year in August, and we have 16 students enrolled. And we actually launched with 7th and 8th grade initially. And next year, we're growing to add our 6th grade to be the full continuous experience. And so next year, with 6th through 8th grade, we'll have about 30 students enrolled. So growing from 16 to 30 here in the next year. So definitely a small number.
Yeah, for sure. So with a micro school, then you're also funded differently. Are you a charter school or a public school or a private school? Talk a little bit about that, and then introduce us to Brian, who's going to talk more about the finances as well.
Sure. Yeah. So Embark Education is an independent school, and we're an independent school partly because of our size. Being a micro school, it wasn't necessarily possible for us to work within the bigger system of public education, nor being chartered here in Colorado. And then, furthermore, being a truly learner-centered environment was difficult to work with the bigger systems because we have a lot more freedoms to really work and meet our students with where they're at. And kind of behind that, the brainchild of how that all works for us is Brian Sense. Brian is the executive director of Great Work Inc. Great Work Inc. is an educational nonprofit that has traditionally worked in the Montessori world. And Brian is one of the founders of Embark Education as well. And he can really share some more about our charge of being an independent school and then doing that in a tuition-free way so that we can be accessible to all students.
Yeah. So Brian, before you start talking, I just want to say one of the challenges of independent schools is that tuition barrier. And so being able to do that in a tuition-free way is super exciting. So tell us about how that actually works.
Absolutely. I think that was one of the kind of the core pieces for us as we were looking at it and saying, hey, if we want to do this thing really differently, we need to be able to do it as, outside of the traditional structure. And at the same time, did not want to get caught up into the, kind of the hierarchies of the private school, the tuition-based models that traditionally are there. And so that was kind of the challenge to me from our board was let's figure out if we can do this, how do we do it so that is not an obstacle or a barrier to providing this kind of an educational experience. And what we landed at is looking at the kind of the launch and the operation of a couple of businesses to support, along with some philanthropic dollars, to basically support the educational experience. And, through modeling and exploration, we actually built a kind of a pathway where we said, if we can get these businesses past their it's right at about 28 months was where we figured it for the coffee shop and right about 24 for the bike shop. At that point, those shops start becoming profitable. And that profitability can actually go to sustain the educational experience themselves. And so, with that, we were able to get out and do some fundraising and do some grant soliciting and find some folks that wanted to take a chance on thinking about structuring education differently, and landed at this model where, we initially launched the business with some grant funding and then utilized the proceeds of the business to roll back in to support the educational process.
And so you created those businesses for the purpose of having a school in them. Did I understand that right?
Yeah. So the way we looked at it, and we went through a couple of different explorations, is we started off by saying, can we partner with existing businesses already? And one of the things we came back with is we were worried about doing so because we really want to give the students ownership over the experience, up to and including sometimes making decisions that might not be in the optimal best health of the business themselves, so that there's real authenticity and real, kind of the natural feedback loops within that. We kind of looking at it where the adults, the leaders, the managers of the businesses themselves all use the kind of the metaphor of bumpers on a bowling alley. Like their job is to make sure that the students don't throw gutter balls. But we also want to let the students not throw strikes every time, because there's a lot to be learned from making decisions and then doing a reflection piece on those within some of those operations. And so in order to do that, that's a really hard thing to ask of a small business, is to let a group of middle schools make some mistakes while being in a decision-making role. So we decided that the only way that we could really kind of do this, at least while we're piloting it and while we're really trying to understand what and how we utilize the shops and utilize the students in leadership roles, was to create the businesses ourselves.
Wow, that is just a fascinating idea. Those are the kinds of things that we talk about and that I've attempted to do in education, and we've had a few instances where some kids have created something business-like, but it's not as real as what you're doing. And so I just think that is a really powerful example. Can you give an example of some business decisions that the kids do get to have input in, and how that either went wrong or went right so far?
Yeah, and actually, Samara will be able to speak to this as well. And she was involved in some of the decision making around. We did some price changes recently as we were putting together our budget for 2020. And we're looking at prices. We're looking at price per cup for every cup of coffee, every drink that we had on the menu, and breaking it down in terms of what that looked like. And ultimately decided that we were able to make 10 and 15 cent changes to the prices without having any customer impact, and ultimately increasing the net surplus of the business by a pretty significant margin when we extend that out over the course of the year. And so that's one of the examples that we'll kind of use in that side of it for sure.
Yeah. So Samara, why don't you come on and talk a little bit about that experience and your overall experience at the school too? Let's address the coffee shop price changes first, and how you were involved in that, and not just, someone whose only role is to buy the coffee.
All right.
Yeah, let me help frame this a little bit for you too, Samara.
Yes, please.
In the sense that, Jethro, how we pose it to our students versus just kind of jumping straight into let's make price changes. Right. It was really this opportunity to look at, we asked our students to look at innovations within either the coffee industry or the bike industry. And Samara chose to dig into looking at the espresso machine. And then she ended up working with her coffee shop manager to go through all of our books and all of our sales over the year. So I'm going to go ahead and stop there. But Samara, the entry point is through the Coffee and Innovation Project and what that led to.
Yes, thank you for reminding me. So basically what we were just doing is that, like Miguel said, we were just doing a certain innovative project on what we wanted to do. And I found particular interest in the espresso machine. And so Embark is solely about trying to find what you are interested in and how you can build it in a kind of real world setting, instead of trying to shy you away from the world. So with that, they help you find things that you are interested in. And I was interested in the coffee machine. So I was there and I was sitting down with our coffee shop manager, and we were looking at the computers. We were looking at stats, everything, the coffee sales, how many people have came in a day, how much money you make off the espresso machine specifically, how we can boost that, just different types of things. We were just coming up with all types of ideas and just really digging in deep with my questions on how I wanted to further my research and present my project.
So when you were doing that, what was your own personal goal? Was your goal to increase revenue, or was it to make better coffee, or what? What were you focused on in that?
Well, we already have outstanding coffee, so I was not worried about that. I was more worried about how we can increase our sales based on the coffee machine. So I wanted to look at the coffee machine specifically because it does produce 85% of our drinks. So I wanted to see how much we can boost that and how we can include it into other drinks, or how we can promote it more. Just basically how we can promote the espresso machine more and make it more money.
And so then what did you learn from that experience of understanding the espresso machine and how it could make you guys more money? What was your own personal outcome from that?
My personal outcome was definitely learning is definitely a strong point for me. I enjoy learning a lot, and just the outcome of just interacting with our coffee shop manager, just having that interaction and being able to know what the stats are and how different people keep track of their businesses and what their business is earning was very valuable, because I have talked to Brian, scheduled meetings with Brian because I would like to start my own business, and managers and different adults are very special to me when it comes to educational and information.
Mm-hmm. And so when you talk about the manager of the coffee shop, is that your teacher? Is that your boss? What's your relationship with the manager of the coffee shop, and what does that look like?
It's basically everything. You could say he's a boss. You could say he's a teacher. You could say he's a friend. We are a very tight-knit community. We don't like to just focus on educational needs, but also social and emotional needs as well. So we really feel comfortable with each other and we know how to work through real-world situations. So he is definitely all my teachers, all my bosses, friends, whatever you like to call them. We all learn from each other. It's not like we definitely do have authority, but it's not as strict. We are independent and we are motivated. So it's very open and just flowing.
So would you tell us what the experience is like at this school versus the schools that you previously attended?
Yeah. So previously I was at a public school that had around 500 students and it was just a big mess. I felt so stressed. I was so stressed all the time trying to get all these assignments in. Here's a due date. There was no personal, hey, how can I help you? Are you doing okay? Is everything okay? It was you need to get this in right now, or in 2 days, we need to assign this. You have to be up to this speed by this date. Rather in when I switched to Embark, I was very happy and relaxed and more willing to come to school and learn in different types of ways instead of just sitting in a classroom. I got to learn in the bike shop and in the coffee shop and go outside and, look at all, just pick up trash, anything I can do for the community or for my learning was more hands-on and less stressful. The educators are willing to work with you based on your individual needs and not where the whole class needs to be. Like Miguel was saying, it's not like 7th graders have a certain goal rather than 8th graders. It's based on every student's individual needs.
Yeah, very interesting. So who are the adults that are at the school with you and are interacting with you? You've talked about the manager of the coffee shop and then Miguel and Brian. So who else is there?
There's my math and science teacher, which is Rusty. And then there's my LA and kind of humanities history teacher, which is Carissa. And then we also have everybody that works at GWI, which is including Barb, Aaron, etc. We have the manager of the bike shop, which is Jake. And we have also Tom that works in the bike shop too. So there's always an adult to help you.
That's very cool. Hey, guess what? I've got a book coming out. How exciting is that? It's called School X, and it's all about helping you as a principal be a designer of your school and not just a manager. So I hope you'll check it out. You can download the free chapter at schoolx.me. So just go to schoolx.me to download the first free chapter. And once you get it, hit reply to the email and tell me what you think. Looking forward to sharing that with you. That's schoolx.me. So going back to you, Miguel, talk about reducing class sizes. You've got all these adults. It sounds like she named almost a dozen different adults that she could be working with. Can you talk about the staffing and maybe Brian add to it, but the staffing for the school part and the staffing for the business part?
Yeah. So, Samara pretty much nailed it, that we've really looked at the structures of the adults in the community, and that all of us have our own areas of focus. So my job is, really looking after and supporting Embark and supporting Rusty and Carissa, who are currently our two 7th and 8th grade educators. And then we also have, as Samara noted, a full coffee shop team, which includes our coffee shop manager and then a full barista team. So they make Pinwheel Coffee, which is our coffee shop, really one of the top rated coffee shops in Denver. And then we have Tom and Jake, which are on our bike shop team. And so the coffee shop team and the bike shop team, we call them our enterprise team. Together, our enterprise team, they're really after making incredible small businesses. But as they're hired on to really create these small businesses, they're also hired knowing that it's not a typical bike shop or coffee shop, that their intention is to support adolescents in their learning. And so in that recognition, all of them kind of take on this role of supporter, teacher, friend, as Samara named it, of our students. And so, one of the amazing things is that as a student is, maybe engaging in some independent math work, they might saddle up at, the bike shop working bar, and they, Tom, one of the bike mechanics, is just as likely to set down his tool to come over and support that student as they're, encounter their first pieces of frustration with their math, as he is to continue working on that bike. He knows that making that impact on students is just as valuable as getting that bike to that customer. And so, we really do have these, all of these adults who have, open eyes and open hearts to work with our students. So
if I could chime in as well, I think one of the, and even going back to some of the origins on why a bike shop and why a coffee shop, goes to the idea that the role of the adult is not just even within kind of the organization or school structure, but is in creating a sense of community. And we've had opportunities. One of the things that is really special about the school is, it's not like there's a classroom and then there's the bike shop and the coffee shop. The bike shop, the coffee shop, the kind of, we call it the learning hub, which is kind of a student only space that is back behind those two shops. All of it is the classroom as well as the community as a whole. And so we're just as likely to have, Tom or do some math, or Jake do some poetry at the bike stand, as we are with having two students having a meeting at a coffee shop table and then being overheard, which this is also just a true story of a community member. As students were talking about creating an art project and a mural on a backyard space that we have, turned out that local artists just happened to be meeting at the table next to them and have volunteered to help kind of bring their professional expertise in to support the student operation. So it's recognizing that when we break down the walls of school and think about, much more of a merged school and life experience that is really kind of attending to the needs of the whole student, there are an enormous amount of adults that can play valuable roles within that ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's super powerful. So, Brian, what does your interview and hire process look like for people at the bike shop and the coffee shop? And how do you, I'm sure they're surprised. I thought it was just going to be a barista, but you want me to work with kids too? What's going on here? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. We spend a pretty decent amount of time in the application and in the posting, really trying to tell the story of what is the experience for those different roles. I think, while every role has a focus, every role also has a kind of the fluidity of being involved in these other aspects of programs. And so, looking at cultural fits and looking at people who we feel like would, both want to and would be good at being able to engage with middle schoolers in an authentic way. And just being really open and honest about that with folks. There's a lot of people who are phenomenal bike mechanics who would not be an appropriate person to kind of work at framework cycles with the students. And that's okay. But as long as we're able to, really create a lot of clarity around that. And then whenever we can, we also involve students in interview processes, both because as somebody who's given a lot of interviews or who've been on the interviewer side as well as the interviewee side, I learn way more about being in an interview by being an interviewer than vice versa. And the more that we are able to include students into all of those kind of experiences, the better that they are prepared as a whole, but also they're able to really kind of get a good sense of adults that they're like, yeah, I could work with that person. That person seems like they would be, somebody that's real. And when you think about kind of what is, during middle school, middle school students know who they want to work around. And it's usually people who feel comfortable in their own skin, who, like everybody during that age, during that time of life is just trying to figure out how do I how do I exist in my body, in my community, in my neighborhood, in my family, like who, and always gravitate towards people who have a good sense of themselves. And that's a lot of what we're trying to build into just the day-to-day school life, is surround kids with people who are themselves, and then let them engage and converse and find these different people to learn from.
Yeah, that's really great. So one of my thoughts about this is that you would think that a school would probably want to do this with high school students, because then they could at least work at the coffee shop and the bike shop as well. But that doesn't sound like that's really your purpose, and you're focusing on middle school and extending from 7th grade down to 6th grade so that you can have the whole middle school experience. Why focus on middle school instead of high school, where you could at least, get some cheap labor in there also?
Sorry, I laugh because at times people have said, "Oh, you guys are just doing this to have the cheap labor of students," and if they only knew that we end up being way more staffed in order to support all the operations.
Exactly.
But, Miguel, I don't know if you want to take this, or I'll maybe give a start and then you tag in from there. But I think part of it is there were a few things that we really were looking at. Some of Great Work Inc.'s kind of backstory has been doing a lot of work within the International Montessori Association on creating what middle and high school looks like for Montessori, and creating training programs and teacher trainings around that area of work. And one of the kind of core components of that has always been this idea of middle school having real authentic experiences with production and exchange of money and interacting within a community as just an essential element that is developmentally appropriate for that, kind of that 12 to 15-year-old student. And so that's originally, some of the just where we have been oriented from and looking at it. The other thing that we really found was there's some really interesting stuff happening in elementary schools and some really interesting stuff happening in high schools. And middle school tends to get ignored by interesting education projects. And it's also like one of the most important ages in terms of how do we set kids up for success and loving and actually liking learning, right? Samara talks about, she loves learning and hated her school prior to coming to Embark. And if that continued, then that continues through into their high school years. Whereas if we can really cultivate and help support her to continue to love learning, the success that she'll have going into high school will be tremendous. But this middle school time period is where a lot of students tend to get missed and not really served with what they actually need. We focus more on we tend to focus more on the academics than on the person. Whereas Embark was our opportunity to say, hey, let's really focus in on how do we build an entire thing around what a middle schooler needs and how do they learn and grow best, not just for these years, but also for their future years.
Yeah. John Catt Educational supports high-quality teaching and learning by providing publications that are research-based, practical, and focused on the key topics proven essential in today's and tomorrow's schools. The latest John Catt publications include a book whose bold, transformative ideas amaze and infuriate people around the world, according to one reviewer. A title from global leaders in curriculum planning, practice, and retrieval. One book that says stop talking and start doing with regard to teacher well-being, and much more. These books, used by educators of all roles across North America and worldwide, amplify fresh, engaging voices with practical strategies to create transformative change. Learn more in our show notes at jethrojones.com/podcast. What do you have to add, Miguel?
I'd just like to jump in. And I mean, Brian really articulated that well. And I'd also just say that, it's never really about the bikes or the coffee. It's really about student learning, right? And if you take it away from looking at it as, two businesses that have students in it and really look at it as truly in a holistic fashion, as these businesses exist to support our students. So it's never really about, again, not about the bikes or the coffee, but about student learning. With that in mind, it's this, as Brian was saying, that middle school is this oftentimes, overlooked area of development and education. And it's really that time where students are finding themselves and answering that question of how do they fit into this world. A lot of research out there shows that students don't drop out in high school they drop out in middle school, they can just actually sign that paperwork and walk away when they're in high school, right? And so if we're able to support students both in continuing that passion, that interest in learning, we're going to be setting them up for success in the future. And moreover than the learning itself is if we're able to support students in being comfortable in their own skin and also understand the basics of building out their own social capital through talking and working with adults in authentic ways, then we're setting them up for success, far, far beyond high school and into their life.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what I've noticed with middle schoolers, being a middle school principal for many years, is that they're so anxious to have meaning and be part of something real. And they understand that school is a game and it's not meaningful like high school where, they say this is going to get you into a good school, which is debatable anyway, but they want to have meaning in what they're doing. And so they so often step away from school because it's boring, but we'll spend hours doing something in Minecraft or Fortnite or learning something else that is not happening at school. And so I just love this idea of focusing on middle school students, giving them an opportunity to be part of something real and do something meaningful, and then saying clearly that it's not about the bikes or the coffee, but it's about student learning and having everybody be okay with that as the approach, and yet still making enough money at these businesses that they can continue to support the student learning. I just think that it's so fantastic and amazing. And I want to go to Samara for a minute and ask you, Samara, what's high school going to look like for you now that you've had this experience at this Embark Middle School?
Definitely knowing where I want to center my learning, because that is definitely what Embark is about. That's why we have a thing called Learner Center Time, which is in our free time. We really focus on what we are interested in, what students are interested in, how we want to grow on that. So definitely for high school, I am looking for summer jobs. I am researching more, and I have barista skills, and I am very interested in being a barista myself for a high school job. So definitely having those skills kind of taking me a little bit further into getting new job opportunities, and in high school just really wanting to explore finding my own business, helping other students, just different types of things, just really branching out in high school and helping everybody.
Well, and what a great barista you will be if you understand the bigger picture of a business more than just pouring coffee and giving it to people, but actually like what goes into making it and making it good and how to increase your profits and things like that. I think that would be so beneficial for someone who's hiring you to work in their shop. So the other thing I want to say about middle school students is it's a time when the things they actually learn, like the standards that the states have, with the exception of algebra, they really aren't that different from grade to grade. And so an English class with most Common Core state standards is really pretty similar 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. There's not a lot of change that's happening in there. And so it seems like the perfect time of a student's life to throw something completely different at them and give them this new experience. Do you have anything to add about that aspect? And any one of you can answer on that one.
I do, for sure. At Embark, when I was doing the 6th grade interviews for our new teacher, she asked me a question. She's like, well, what do you see Embark's future as? And I said, well, we want our students to be very independent, and we want them to be comfortable with being uncomfortable in the most comfortable way possible. And if they need a little push, our educators are here to give us a little push if needed. But most of the time we are very self-motivated and very independent about it. So just being comfortable with stepping outside our comfort zone.
Yeah. And self-motivated is not how most people describe middle schoolers. And yet they are out there. They do exist. And when given the opportunity, I've found that they often rise to that occasion. Anything to add to that, Miguel or Brian?
I would, one of the things that I've sometimes said, and I kind of come from less traditional education stock. So this sometimes gets me in trouble in the education ecospheres. But I always kind of look at it like middle school there's very little that you learn in middle school that you haven't already either had in kind of the most basic form, or you're not going to get in a much deeper form. And so kind of like you said, it's the opportunity to really focus in on all of these really important, kind of learning, but not necessarily in the traditional academics. It's more learning as a human being as opposed to learning as a student even. And with that kind of a focus, it gives so much opportunity to ultimately, I think, cultivate habits that will become really essential in learning and growing more as an academic student into high school and beyond. But just even as a person and being happy and being engaged and being present in the work that they're doing. And so, yeah, that's at least kind of philosophically the way I look at middle school is the academics are there and they're important, but it's really about who they are as people.
Yeah, Brian, that is absolutely correct. And every middle school educator will agree with you on that and then go right back to the classroom and say, we got to get this work done. And it's just something that I totally do not understand. But that is what those kids need, and that's where they're at. So in closing, I really appreciate all three of you being here. And so my final question is, what is one thing that a principal can do this week to be a transformative leader like you? So, Miguel, I'll start with you, and then we'll do Samara second, so she has a little bit of time to think about that.
Yeah, I think that the one piece I would say about, that any leader can do this week is when they look at their students and look at them as young adults, it's to treat them as adults and then support them in being young, right? And if you can approach it in that fashion, as, honor them as their whole people and then support them in their youth, I think that makes a huge difference.
Very good. Samara, what's your thought on that? How to be a transformative leader?
It's definitely very important. We don't want to say that one person can lead a bunch of group of people, just that one person. We want to give everybody the ability to realize their self-worth and how powerful they are with the knowledge and education they're getting from educators, from themselves, learning by themselves. So being a leader is definitely something that is important and powerful for us.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Give people the ability to realize their self-worth and give them opportunities to lead others. Very good. Brian, we'll close out with you.
I'm gonna just say, listen humbly, and I'm gonna use. I mean, before Samara jumped on, I had said, just so you know, Samara, because you'll probably hear it in the podcast anyway, that Samara is way smarter than me and Miguel combined. And I think as just listening to your answers, her answers in this podcast, it just reinforces this idea that, if we listen and be humble about listening, Samara and every other student knows what they need better than we can. And it's really our job to support that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been so awesome. This is a brilliant model that you have developed, and it's so exciting to hear about. And there's so many more questions that I still have that I know our listeners still have, so we may need to do a part 2 of this. And thank you, Samara, so much for coming on as a student and sharing your insight with us. And there are going to be thousands of people that hear this, Samara, and it's very cool that you're willing to take this time to do it. I want to remind you that you can get the show notes for this at jethrojones.com/podcast. And if you want to learn more about Embark Education, you can go to embarkeducation.org and check those out. And if you're ever in the Denver area, definitely stop by the coffee shop and the bike shop and see what they're doing. And once again, I want to say thank you to Brian, Miguel, and Samara for being part of Transformative Principal.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Jethro.
Thank you.
Thank you to our valued partner, John Catt Educational. If you are a leader looking to make transformative change by providing yourself and your leaders and teachers with professional development that is research-based and rigorous, yet easy to digest and full of practical strategies, check out the latest publications from John Catt. Visit us.johncattbookshop.com to find information on bulk orders or learn much more in our show notes. You can also use the code TRANSFORMATIVE to save a bundle at us.johncattbookshop.com.